All right, welcome everyone. I'm Rob Akins. As you guys are probably aware, I'm the director of the Professional Development Core for the Delaware CTR ACCEL program. And this is Flight School. So the first session of Flight School is to go over the components and make sure everybody knows what they need to work on and give you guys some advice about how to do that. All right, so the research pilot program website is open. It's actually open in the meeting, is what I mean, so you guys can see it on my shared screen. And what I'll do is just go through, but instead of using all the drop downs on the website, I'm going to go to this application instructions form, which is here. I'm just going to double check that we got the right one. Hold on. There was some issues.
Yeah, that doesn't look like the right one.
Yeah, okay. How about this one? Here we go. All right. So there were some issues, and I apologize for those for the website. Keep in mind that the CTR really isn't that old. So some of the infrastructure things we're still trying to work out. So one of the reasons we're having this is to make sure that everyone is aware of what we're doing. This is a clinical and translational pilot grant program. So the first link within this document is to a 2010 paper defining what clinical and translational research means, what those things are. In general, you can think about clinical research as involving human subjects, whether that's interventional or you're using materials from human subjects. In translational as work, which is much sort of hazier in its definition, as work leading toward those kinds of studies involving human subjects, or taking data and trying to figure out implementation in community or best practices, right? So that's what clinical and translational research are. The CTR has a relatively broad scope of things that they're looking for. And to be clear, these topic areas are not meant to restrict submissions. They're meant to be areas that the CTR really wants to see grants from. So cancer, cardiovascular disease, stroke, big data, obesity, women's health, infant mortality, and community engaged research. Have been staples of CTR's programs for a while. There are specific reasons that CTR would like to see, or the ACCEL program would like to see work done in looking at social determinants of health and health disparities, and especially around substance use and abuse and opioid epidemic. In addition, again, I said this is broad, there are 3 areas of high importance going forward. Those are rehabilitation, preventive care, and behavioral and mental health. That said, one way to think about this, at least from my perspective on the professional development core, is when these grants go in, best science wins. So if you're not in these areas, in a way, it's hard to not be in one of these areas, and you have the best proposal and the best score proposal, then you're going to be considered for funding. These are just areas that they would like to see grants come in for. They would like to see sort of networked interactions. So working across institutions within ACCEL is a plus. But again, from my perspective, I do not recommend bending over backwards to include another institution if it doesn't make sense for what you're trying to accomplish. All right, you guys stop me when you have questions. If anyone's ever done an NIH grant, this is really similar in terms of the forms that are used, formatting, and what size fonts, and how you prepare everything to NIH proposals. They use the example of an RO3, which is a 6-page grant. And the links that are included in the forms take you to all of the specific, in this document, take you to all of the specific forms that you would need. So the NIH face page. Okay. So the NIH face page, I had staged all this, but my laptop died. So I am using a loaner laptop at the moment. All right, so this is directly the same thing that you would see in an NIH grant. The way you fill it out for NIH now is a little bit different, but some of the things that you need to be aware of almost immediately or whether or not you're doing human subjects research, right? Because you're going to be asked about that. You'll need to talk to your OSP folks, which in fact, as you're looking through all these forms and deciding whether or not you're going to submit, should be the 0th or first thing that you do, is talk to the administrator at your institution who will help you get this thing put together and submitted. So each institution will have their own support and their own specific mechanisms. The CTR or the ACCEL program is expecting you to fill this out, and those OSP folks have seen this form many times before. Right, so there's a bunch of things you have to fill out here. I am happy to help if it doesn't make sense to you what you need to fill out, or if you're having sort of conceptualization trouble in figuring out how to do any of this stuff, let me know. But we do need to know who your administrative official is, and that's the person who's going to be notified. It's typically someone in OSP, and then your official signing for the applicant organization, which is going to be a senior administrator or researcher at your institute. Where's Erin when you need her? Okay. All right. Okay. There are definitions for each of these things. So the NIH pages for summary, relevant, your performance site, who's senior and key personnel versus who is just personnel, and who's another, like sort of an other significant contributor, all have specific definitions. And I'm going to leave that part for a second because I'm going to go back and show you examples of sort of the budget justification pages and a bio sketch that you need to work out. These things are listed early, and you should think about doing these things early. And that is work on your bio sketch, talk to someone at OSP in your institution about getting your budget and your justification straightened out. The forms are here so that you can look at them. But when after we get through this list, I'll show you some examples. The strategy is something that I can help you work on in the professional development course available to help you figure out how to structure your research strategy. Those are specific components that are required and sort of an explanation of what you're going to do to meet the 6-page meat of the grant. You also need to provide if you had previous funding, especially from an idea mechanism, what you did with that money, what the results were, what your successes were from that money. The human subjects, so I'm going to ask this question in a weird way, but if anyone is considering using animals, like a preclinical study with animals, you just unmute and let me know. Because I'm going to go into human subjects, but I might skip the vertebrate animal stuff if no one is going to do. All right, so the human subjects part is another thing. If your project involves human subjects, if that's directly or you use examples from human subjects, if there's anything clinical/human about what you're working on, you need to fill out these forms. They're relatively straightforward, although they don't look like it when you first look at them. And I'll give you an example, again, of some stuff that I've put together around human subjects for a simple study. And you have to tell us your planned enrollment. And the planned enrollment has to be based on the demographics of the state or the patient population or your institution. It is not, we're going to enroll 50% males and 50% females. So it's got to reflect your inclusion across ethnic categories and across sexes. So that's a very specific document that has to be filled out. You'll need letter of support from your department head chair. That's a little, as you go across different institutions, who that person is may vary a little bit. So if you're confused, the person who would know is your OSP contact. And I'm happy, again, to help you try to figure out who you need support letters from. If you're what's called an NIH new investigator, and that means you have not had a major NIH grant before, an R01 type grant or that level grant, then you must include a letter from a primary mentor who's going to help you through the execution of the study. Again, that is an important thing to do early on and make sure that your mentor is on board and that you've identified the right person. In fact, I would suggest, I'm again happy to talk to you about this, thinking about a mentoring team. So having a content mentor and then another person that can help you navigate your home institution. At least the average for people doing clinical research in particular is 3 mentors. That number varies depending on what you're working on. We're not going to talk about resubmissions that's specific. Everyone is encouraged to fill out this community engagement form. It says if applicable. Right, so the community engagement outreach core is one of the main cores, including the others being professional development and a biostatistics, epidemiology, and research design core. So the community engagement and outreach core is looking for specific applications in their areas of interest, but I recommend, in fact, you should fill this out regardless. At a minimum, they will help you with the lay research summary for your proposal and help you with input about how your research can impact patient populations, especially in the state of Delaware. So that will help you on review. The CEO, Community Engagement Outreach Group, will look at these. And in fact, for people who are proposing, especially community-based participatory research and community-engaged research, they will score them. But even if you're not doing that, you should still fill this out. It's quick to fill out. That consultation with the CEO will be valuable, even if it's just at the level of how you explain your research to a lay audience. So that's the link, the community engagement link will take you right to that REDCap form. Right. Any questions so far? Excellent. I'm going fast, but I think the best way to do this is for me to get done talking and you guys to ask questions. Before you submit, you are actually required to, I mentioned this biostatistics, epidemiology, and research design core, that's BIRD. You are required to submit your methodology or to consult with BIRD. This is sort of what I tell my mentees, this is like good for you medicine. It sounds like it might be a pain in the neck, but trust me, just do it. And the outcomes at the end will be highly beneficial, which is why, one of the reasons why it's required. So if you are not familiar with this, so BIRD, this will have my name, right, and my information in. There's a simple request, and I recommend you do this for any study you're thinking about, not just pilot, that will populate with some of your information. And then they ask you some basics about what you're trying to do, what you want to work on. Really quite simple to fill out. You tell them what you're looking for, and if this is a grant proposal that you're doing for CTR, but if you have you're trying to design something, you're looking for consultation, you're trying to get, say, a statistical description or develop a statistical section for a grant you're submitting, other than the CTR grant, they would be happy to do that. So it's very simple to fill out, and it is required that you just click on it. You need to log into the ACCEL website, and by virtue of the fact that you're on this call, I think you probably all have ACCEL logins, but you need to be able to log into the ACCEL website. I mentioned this, if you're a new investigator, and I can go here if you want to, new investigator, someone who's not received a substantial award before, then you have to interact with us. So Aaron Regal, who's the manager for the PDC, I'm the director, and there's a bunch of other people that support us to get your mentoring plan together and to kind of work out exactly how you're going to work with your mentor. These pilots go by very quickly, and being able to specifically articulate what you're going to do with your mentor or your mentoring team, and then focusing on doing those things will help you enormously. There's tons of data on how helpful these individual development plans in particular are. You guys are attending session 1 of flight school. This is informational. The second one comes up pretty quickly. It's only a month away, is for us to review your specific aims. So we will put together a team of people that are that are recused from reviewing your grants going forward. So I'll just pull in friends from other institutions, right, and try to not dip too much into what Dr. Higginson is going to have to do for their review. and we essentially pre-review your specific aims and make suggestions. So that'll be happening on February 20th. We really need to know if you're going to attend and what you want us to talk about. So as soon as you can, if you want to do this on February 20th, let us know. We don't need your aims, right, until the week before, but we do need a topic area so we can start lining up people to join us in doing those reviews. All right. It's strongly recommended. In fact, I would change this to you have to do this pre-submission process with the community engagement and outreach core. It doesn't hurt you at all, and in fact, it's helpful to do it. And there's big upsides to having that box kind of checked off. All right, when you submit and at the end of this, there's some review criteria. The structure of this research strategy that I mentioned above is the same for an NIH grant. That's a specific aims page, limited to one page, and then sections on significance, innovation, approach. Together, these should be 4 pages in length. Sorry about that, Jill. This is 6, right? Dr. Hayden?
Yes, you're right. That should be 6.
All right. Again, keep in mind.
Yeah. We're having a discussion about whether the specific aim should be a separate page, but at the moment, the dashboard is expecting a single document that includes the specific aims. Okay.
So that should be 6 pages. Forgive us in advance if there are little glitches and things. We're trying to get all this stuff up and running as quickly as possible. And I'm happy, again, as sort of more individualized mentoring to talk to you guys about what these sections are and what they include. At this point, though, I want you to focus on what the administrative things and what you need to get working on. I mean, you do have to have the concept down, but you also want to get started on these other things. So I didn't hear anybody doing vertebrate animals. If there are, just let me know and I can chat with you about that. The Institutional Review Board and sort of the human subjects documentation should not be left until later on. In fact, it is at the very beginning as you're figuring out the design and starting to submit your IRB paperwork that you should be working through this, right? So your approval, what happens with these grants is they get reviewed by Jill's group. She'll make a recommendation to the executive team for the CTR, who makes the final funding decision. And then our external advisory board and then NIH have to approve them. All the research that's done through CTR requires NIH approval, NIH program officer's approval. So those things are going to go to NIH on May 5th. And Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, if you don't have your documents ready by then, you're not going to get funded. It doesn't matter if you have the best grant and the best reviews since sliced bread. We simply cannot wait to get everything submitted to them for approval. That said,
sorry. Yeah, that's true.
Yep. Thank you, Jill. So do this early. Unless you have a really complicated study, in which case you're probably not going to be able to do it with a pilot in 1 year anyway. The IRB submission should be pretty straightforward. All right, so start that early. Start working on your bias sketch early. I mentioned that. If you're going to work across campuses, which we like you to do, and you say you want to work in Nemours, but you're from Delaware State, talk to me and I'll connect you with the person to make sure that you get a badge. Oh, my camera's on. I was holding my badge up so you can see it. That you can get in, that you're approved to work with the people you want to work with. I use Nemours as the example because we're a pediatric hospital, so some of the barriers that you have to clear, right? All children are a vulnerable population, so getting to work here is harder than getting to work in some other location. So start that early, right? To be eligible, which I guess I skipped over this, you have to be faculty at one of the ACCEL partner institutions. Everyone that I see on this call is, so that shouldn't be a problem. You in some instances, you can have multiple PI grants. They're not allowed in this context. You can have co-investigators, but you can't have multiple PIs, right? Is there a question? All right, we can talk more about mentors, and we mentioned new investigators. If you know your mentor, which I hope is true, that's great, and I can talk to you about building a team around that person. We are trying to build a system so that you can identify mentors within the state, but right now that is still ad hoc. So if you need someone, you're interested in doing a project on X, and you need someone with expertise in this subpart of what you need to work on, I will try to help you find that person. You know, I've been around a while. I know a lot of people, and they know a lot of people. So it's sort of done that way now, if you need help trying to identify someone. That said, the strongest mentoring relationships are ones that sort of are organic between the mentor and the mentee, not the ones we're trying to put them together. All right, so everything needs to be submitted by midnight on March 16th. So that's rapid, it's 2 months, 8 weeks from now. Again, if you start early with all of these administrative components, and you can focus as you're getting closer to the deadline on the science components, you will make your life a lot easier and actually be much more likely to get a strong submission in. The cost is pretty straightforward. Is $80,000 direct. If anybody doesn't know what that means, let me know. You can request up to $80,000 for the year to start on July 1st. There are specific individuals at each institution that you should contact early on. Each site, and I don't even know what some of the differences might be between sites, but each site may have specific things that you have to do, specific forms. For example, anyone at Nemours who wants to submit has to contact Denise, who will have them fill out a form, and your submission has to be approved internally before you can send it in. But that's a pretty straightforward thing to get going. These are the contacts at each of the institutes. And then finally, this is actually where I usually start these kinds of conversations, is you should take a look at the evaluation criteria. This is how your grant is going to be judged and sort of where places are that you can try to strengthen things. For example, preference to multiple partner institutions, those are given a priority. So if it makes sense, do it. Again, I wouldn't bend over backwards to try to ram a square peg into a round hole. If it doesn't make sense, don't do it. There's some other information in here that you should take advantage of and look at. All right, any questions so far? All right, let me see if I can find these. I get a little divided up at where things are located. Hold on, it's like walking and chewing gum. All right, so one of the things that I'm happy to give you access to, and we can do this through Aaron Regal, just let me know, is I have a Google folder that has tons of information from NIH. So each of these documents is, as far as I know, as far as I can tell, as of November 2019, the most recent example of that document from NIH or from us. So it includes things, for example, if you've never had to write sex as a biological variable section, which you'll see when you're looking at the human subjects portion, this is what reviewers get, what they're asked to use when they're reviewing those documents. Right, so I'm happy to share these. What I try to do is share the folder, so if this changes or there's new information, I can just dump it into the folder. And that's part of, we're getting that more harmonized with the toolkit that's available through ACCEL. But for right now, it's just a Google document. In that folder, there's a particularly useful document on this it's a checklist that I and others put together through CTR and INBRI on successful specific aims pages. So as you're getting all your administrative stuff started, the key page that you really want to focus on is the specific aims page. It's sort of a summary of what you're planning to do. Rick McGee, who's at Northwestern a number of years ago, actually did a study where he looked at successful versus non-successful specific aims pages for a bunch of NIH grants. And the results of that are on the CLIMB, that's their program at Northwestern. But these are the things that came out of it. So successful specific aims pages include these things, not necessarily in this order. And when someone does a review for me, and it's the first time, I give them this so that they can look at a specific aims page and make sure they can figure all of this stuff out. So as you're thinking about your project, you should be able to articulate all of this stuff. One of the ones that's a recurrent question that should be included in the aims page and also on your bio sketch and your personal statement is why you should be doing this. And again, I'm happy to share some of my specific aims pages or examples. But reading through this, you should always say my group works on, or our team has done this, like some statement in the context of the overall application that links you to the study, especially if you're a new investigator. So the why this PI, and actually each of these things is pretty short. It doesn't have to be a long discussion, but at the end, the reviewer should have all of this stuff in their heads. And what that does is it helps them advocate for you, and it generates in them sort of enthusiasm for what you're planning. And then when they go into the rest of the grant, they have like a complete context for the whole thing, which is really what you're trying to communicate with a specific aims page, right? So this checklist is especially useful component of what's in that folder. Happy to share. You guys can have any of this stuff. Just let me know and I'll send you the link. All right, let me see if I can find these examples and then I am done. Budget. Your OSP people will help you with some of this. On the bio, so here's a blank bio sketch. Start this early, especially if you don't have one. There are some portions of it. This is the template that you get, and I don't think I have one of mine open, but these are long. You're limited to 5 pages. There are specific things that are expected and specific rules over like how you include references, kind of links you have to have, and sort of ideas or at least best practices what you need to include in each of those sections. But if you are just getting started and this is the only thing you have to go on, and you want some help, let me know. And either I will help you or I'll connect you with someone who can. So this is for human subjects. Again, this is just telling you what you need to provide. And this is divided up into sections, right? So anything that involves human subjects, you got to do all of this. Okay. So I think it's a little bit better to look at one. Oh, man. I closed. One's. I apologize for that. Opening. So let's do it this way. We're going to open this for questions, and I will try to on the side because I don't want to just have you guys listening to me look for a file that's probably not accessible through this borrowed laptop. The human subjects part can be pretty lengthy depending on exactly what you want to do. And it's a little bit opaque when you first look at the directions, exactly what reviewers and what NIH in particular is expecting. So I'm happy to review that with you if you're going to move forward with your grant. Okay? And then while we're talking, right, because I already took half the time, while we're talking and answering any questions, I will try to look for one, and then we can share it maybe if we have time at the end. All right, so that's a quick overview. There's a lot of pieces, there's a lot of information. Each piece that you have to put together, there's a lot that goes into it, but none of it's really hard. It's just a lot. So you really need to take advantage of people that know what they're doing. OSP, sure. Bird, right, for your statistical design, the community engagement outreach folks, my group, the professional development core, can help you with all the structures, and especially your mentor. So the earlier you start pulling those pieces together and getting those administrative things kind of out of the way, the better off you're going to be. All right, questions. So if you want to ask a question, I ask that you use your, you can unmute yourself, right? Or you can use your space bar to ask a question. There's no way what I just told you guys is perfectly clear.
I'll ask a question. This is Caroline. Hi.
Hey, Caroline, how are you?
Good. Thank you for the presentation. I was just thinking about when you said why you as part of the specific aims, and I always think of the specific aims as like very straightforward background science significance. Like, what are some examples of like why you like?
Okay. So let me just be clear. That checklist is not generated by what NIH wants. That checklist is generated by what has been successful in study section. So this isn't necessarily indicated to be. But when Rick's group went through and they did all this sort of linguistic analysis and pulled everything apart and you sort of did a statistical analysis, that was a common theme. And an example might be, so for me, access. So for me, one of the things we do is we try to improve post-surgical outcomes using biomaterials and stem cells, right? So I would talk about whatever the surgery that we're doing, why that's a big problem, what we don't know. That's sort of the order I would do it in. And then I would say our group has, and I would talk about what we're currently working on, not necessarily in great detail, right? It might be depending on the context or what kind of grant I'm applying for. I would say, our group has been working on, specific soft material hydrogels for applications in improving post-surgical recovery after arterial manipulation. And then if it's relevant, give some specific information we have found, right, which is part of the rationale for why we want. But by doing it that way, it insinuates into that structure that it's a good idea, right? So this is now me switching gears on the reviewer. This is a great idea. Somebody should look at this. This is a good approach. These folks can do it, which is the thing you want kind of implanted in their head. And I like these aims. So at the end of the specific aims page, all of those pieces click into place for them to give you a good review. So you're right. It's not something that's sort of specified that you have to put in there, but it is something that, use this quote, but when you read a specific aims page and you go, well, that's a good one, it's generally in there. And, reviewers with experience, I've done tons of NIH reviews, you kind of know it when you see it. This person knows what they're doing and they put this together and I understand it. And even though I'm tired and cranky, I like this grant and I like this person and I want to help them. So you're right, but I still recommend that you find some way to let the reviewer know that you can do this. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes it tricky when you're a young investigator and you don't have as much, to say like I've done X, Y, Z, especially if it's like a new project for you. So I'm just in my mind thinking how am I gonna?
But it doesn't have to be. It could be my group is interested in. Right, my group works on. It doesn't have to be we've chest thumping accomplished all this stuff. You should give us the money, but it should be some way to link you to the project.
Okay.
Right. And again, none of these have to be there. So this is all based on sort of the statistics, and most or all of these things are usually there. So if it doesn't make sense because of the way you structured the aims page and sort of the flow of everything, and if it doesn't make sense to include it, then don't include it. This is not meant to be, you absolutely must do this. What I'm suggesting is you think about all of these things and you can articulate them, right? So
Yeah.
for you, Caroline, the why is because that it's driven by your clinical interest and you really want to know the answer to this question and you are in a position to do these studies. Right? You have more space to do that again on the BioSketch, your personal statement on the BioSketch. It's still not an infinite amount of space, but you can put in there more of your background and training. But it's, I haven't seen data on this recently. This is a little bit difficult to think about, but even if they don't admit it, at least at a subliminal level, most reviewers make a decision about a grant after they read the. So if they're confused at all, and a piece is missing for them to get the picture, as they read the rest of the grant, it's almost like they're rationalizing that feeling they had while they were reading the aims. In fact, a good friend of mine who's in lots of reviews said that's how she does it. She just reads the aims, very intuitive person. If she likes it, she likes the grant, she's going to figure out how to fund the grant, how to get the grant a good score. If she doesn't like it, basically she's figuring out how to justify not funding. So it's your best chance. The other thing to think about, and not necessarily for the pilots, but in a broader sense, when I'm on the study section, there might be 75 grants we're looking at, and I might have 12 that I have to read, and I'm presenting 3 in this next half-hour period, and I like yours. I remember liking it. I have notes on it, and then someone else doesn't like it, and now I have to fight for it. If I can go to your aims page and get most of the information to kind of remind my brain why I liked it so much, you are in much better shape because I can advocate for you. And I'm not flipping around trying to find something, your BioSketch or something else. I go to one page, all the salient important information is right there. So you help the reviewers help you. Other questions?
Yeah, I had one question on the page about prior grants. Is that only for like the CTR or ACCEL grants, or if you've had a different grant, like I have a grant from the DoD, you don't include that for that? That's only for CTR ACCEL grants?
No, well, it's for IDEA grants. Right, so you're talking about this, I think you can still see my screen.
Yeah, the success from prior awards part. Yeah, that part.
Right, so the it's specific to these grants. So
okay.
The CTR, which sponsors the ACCEL program, INBRI, which a lot of you guys know about, or any of the COBRIs, I don't think DHSA, the Delaware Health Science Alliance, has sponsored grants in a while, but those grant mechanisms all have some unification around the types of research and the interactions of the institutions. And for the CTR, INBRI, and COBRI, they all roll up under the same overall IDEA program, Institutional Development Award program at NIH. So if you had prior support, the next group wants to know, well, what did you do with that? Because we don't want to be seen by NIH as sort of just treating people together and running a laboratory based on just jumping around from one pilot grant mechanism to another one.
Okay, so that was my question. Thank you.
You'll see also that if you have completed or you're getting close to completing your first year, you can submit a renewal request. I don't think anybody on the call is in that situation, but if you want to do a second year, your pilot's going well, you're doing a second year, you also have to do progress report. Okay. Other questions? Jill, do you have anything you want to add while I'm pulling this?
I do have a question. This is Eva.
Eva.
Can you hear me? Hi. So my question is about the IRB. I just looked at the dates, and it looks like you're not going to be announcing. When are you going to announce it? I just want to
announce. I don't remember, but the IRB. You mean
May 20? You're going to make a decision, or so? I'm a little confused. So you're going to. Proposal is due on March 16th, which means that at UD, the first opportunity we have to submit the IRB would be early April. So even if we are not funded, because we are not going to know we would go ahead and submit the IRB for that proposal just to be safe, or I just.
So that's a good question. Maybe Jill can help with that, and I'll just comment in general. So
Okay.
we at Nemours do not have to wait for the merit review. So I can submit IRBs as soon as I have a plan to do the study, right? So we do that with submission or even prior. So if the IRB paperwork is all set before I submit the grant, our IRB prefers to get it then.
Okay. So even if we're not funded, we should just go for submitting the IRB proposal, even though there's no promise of funding, to just have it underway in case we get funded. Is that kind of how you want it?
That's how I want it, but let me let Jill, because I'm not at UD, right? I'm at Nemours. Let me let Jill comment on that.
Yes, that's the UD recommendation too, so that when the funding does come in July 1st, you are ready to roll.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
I'm going to pull up a bio sketch.
Rob, I wanted to echo one of the comments you made before about at a study section and you're reviewing, a whole bunch of grants. It makes, I think of when you're writing these proposals to think about the perspective of the reviewer, make it as easy as possible for your reviewer to pull out the key elements like the innovative components and the significance and the impact of this work so that they can articulate it to the group, but so they understand it and identify with it and they're able to champion it better.
Yeah,
so I think that's true for the investigator piece that you mentioned in the specific games, but that's true for all the components too.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing as you go forward because you'll get comments back from reviewers and sometimes they're not. You might look at them that they're not right, but in reality, the folks on the study panel, and this might seem like an odd thing to say, but they really are trying to help you. And you should think about it that way. And they are trying to help you, but they're, like in my case, I'm usually, I have a panel coming up and I don't know why I agreed to do this. I have so many other things I need to do. So if you make it easy for me, I'll review your grant and I might like it, but if it's not easy for me and I'm tired and I'm cranky and I really should be doing something else, if it's not easy for me to go into that document and remind myself and then advocate for you, you missed an opportunity for me to help you. And that's a good way to look at it. That this person who's a little bit tired and can't quite, it doesn't necessarily do exactly what you do. And in fact, for the pilot investigators, because your grants are reviewed for that mechanism, that is probably actually true. So if it's too dense, wall of text, like it all might be in there. But the dividing line between the grants that get advocated for and funded and the ones that don't, that should have been funded, is often in the grantsmanship and how easy it is for that person to get what you're doing. It's got to be strong science and an excellent approach, but to get what you're doing and be able to advocate for you. All right, so what I'm sharing, and I think you can see this, is one of my, this is for the Idea State Pediatric Clinical Trials Network. We're trying to renew an MPI on that. So my personal statement, because this is for supporting clinical trials, focuses on clinical and sort of my past experience. What you get after your personal statement is up to 4 examples of work that you did. So these all highlight cross-institutional work. Then you have your sort of positions and honors, and typically and this varies actually, it can vary study section to study section. What these folks are looking at is someone who has a lot of experience. So I include my review panel experience. So usually I wouldn't go back. These guys I would have taken out. That's too far back to go. I didn't edit this properly, or maybe this is a penultimate version. Honors, and then you have a section which kind of back to one of the things Caroline said. It's your contributions to science, which for new people is like dancing on a knife edge, because I'm old. So I did a lot of stuff. So I can put things in this stuff. You can see the dates on these. And I go in sort of chronological order for this section, oldest to newest. So I was just lucky enough to work on something early in my career, which is now out there and gets cited a lot, and companies use it, and I don't even work on it anymore, but it was a pretty impactful contribution. When you're just getting started, it's harder to do, but you still have to put it in there. For the pilot review, again, Jill will run these so she can comment more specifically. I'm not sure how much this matters, but what we're trying to do is get you ready to submit to NIH. And at that point, it can matter a lot. So you can't skip it, can't assume people will be able to tell from your sort of your references that you include. And for each contribution, you get 4, that they'll be able to figure it out. So you do have to put something in there that allows them to understand what you contributed, and to whether you led it, whether you were a co-investigator, whatever it was. You are also supposed to put the PMCID. If people don't know what that is, let me know. And then you have to put a link to your public bibliography at MyNCBI. So I'm not going to try this, but if you don't have one, if you don't have a MyNCBI profile, and you don't know what an ORCID or ORCID is, let me know. If a lot of people want to know now, we can just go to that site and pull that stuff up. But you're required to put this link in now on your BioSketch. So again, one of the reasons to get started early is there's a little bit of legwork that goes into setting up your profile and making sure it's pulling all of your references over in a bibliography so that you can provide the link. Again, maybe not super critical for the pilot reviews, but as you're pulling these together, you need to know that that's got to be on there. And then there's a section that's now research support and or scholastic performance, which is ongoing and completed support in the last 3 years. And in this context, this is not your other support document, which is a different document that you will be asked for when you get funded. There's no dollar amounts, just what are the grants that you've been working on. All right, so any questions about that? You see, in my BioSketch is the full 5 pages. You can see how old I am, so I'm taking that off. And then let me try to find one other thing, since we have a couple minutes. So ask questions if you have them. I'm going to try to find one of my human subjects things. I'm like working in the cloud to do that. So are there other questions?
I can make a comment. I think last year we funded on the order of 8 or 10 pilot projects, and we're looking to really exceed that number this year. So please submit. We are eager to see all sorts of applications across those domains that are listed as priority areas.
Perfect. I can't walk and chew gum at the same time, so I am still attentive to what's going on. I can't get it. So I will share this. This is not exactly the thing I was looking for, but I will share this. So one of the things that you have to account for, and again, I'm assuming most people will be doing human subjects. This is just from a recent R21 that has to do with cerebral palsy. So there's a statement that NIH requires, and there's something similar that's required for the pilot grant. It is a point of review at study section, and that's sex as a biological variable. And as you're thinking about these things and pulling your aims together, let me know. We can talk more about what you have to include and how to structure these things. But when you propose anything, even if it's an animal study, actually, even when we're not doing animal studies, I put this in. So in this case, CP is more prevalent in males than females, but there's in terms of functional ability, there's not really a difference by sex. And then talk about, and this is just an R21, I think gets reviewed in a couple weeks. We actually include both males and females, and we're expecting to see, in the analysis, we're expecting to detect differences, but we're not going to evaluate them in this study because it's basically a pilot study. But you are required to do this in a study section. The person running the study section will ask about this and also about the rigor of your sort of rationale, the basis for why you're doing this study, which is literature, and then the structure of your approach, addressing things like the rigor and reproducibility of that approach and the statistical methods. So I have examples of all of these, which I'm happy to share. There's no, I share things. If you guys have suggestions, that's great. That's a big win for me. But unless there's something confidential in it, it's intellectual property or salaries or something like that, I can't share it. I'm happy to give you guys examples of what I do, which is actually, in terms of clinical research, I don't do interventional studies. I'm a co-investigator on a number of different types of studies, but I'm not a PI. We're still at an earlier discovery phase with the patients that we work with, but I'm happy to do that. All right. You guys okay? A lot of quiet. I'm going to unmute everybody. I figure out how to do that.
Hi, Rob. I have a question. This is Juan at DSU.
Yep. What's your question?
So, yeah, I set up PMID with a hyperlink, but I didn't add PMC ID. Is it essential?
Yes. So, well, it's essential in some reporting contexts. I'm not sure what the actual rule ended up being from NIH, but on my BioSketch, and this is based on what program officers at NIH told me that they're either requiring or going to require, I include the PMC ID, or if there's not a PMC ID, why, right? So if it's work we did without federal funding with a company, there's no requirement to have a PMC ID. So you should still get one and register that information if you can.
Okay.
So you have a PMID that...
It is linked.
So, in your BioSketch, you mean?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I guess, and Jill can comment, for the pilot grant, I think that's fine, because if anything, the reviewer is just going to want to go look at the paper. NIH, though, requires in reporting that everything have a PMC ID or be in process. In fact, when if you get the CTR pilot funding, when we do our annual report, we have to put your articles in with the PMC ID. And if you don't have one and it's not in process, they can hold up the entire grant. And that has happened. That has happened to one of the Cobries up here. I think it was just 2 PMC IDs that were missing, and the whole year's funding was held until they were provided. Yeah. It's getting easier and easier to get the PMC IDs, and I'm assuming you have them. You just don't put them in your BioSketch, which is probably okay. If you want to go above and beyond, put the PMC ID in there. And I put links in, although I'm going to start taking those out because the reviewers they're not allowed to click on links unless they're at NIH. So there's really no reason to put the link in.
Okay, I definitely need to add then. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Is there another question or comment?
Nope.
Okay. All right, so I think everyone, let me take a quick look. Oh, nobody hang up. I get yelled at by Erin. And for those of you who don't know, Erin runs the whole professional development core, and you should keep her in the loop, right? Because she knows about all the resources that are coming, how to connect people, getting you meetings information. But I need to do like a print screen. Someone's chatting. One second. All right, one last chance. Any questions you guys have?
Can you hear me?
Hard to hear you. I think someone's trying to talk, but it's hard to.
This is Sunita. Can you hear me now?
I can. Hey, Sunita, how are you?
Okay. I think I messed up with the phone mute button. We had a quick question on the budget. So where it says appropriate amount for supply, what can these supplies entail?
So for the category supplies, you mean? So there's supplies, anything that you need that will be used up during the course of the study, right? So if you are going, like for us, which might be the easiest way to do this, we get blood samples, we have to process them to do next-gen sequencing. So we need tubes and reagents and pipettes and gloves. Those are all supplies that are associated with doing the study. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm only asking because I'm in the computer science department.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking to add supplies in a slightly different way, which would be hardware related. I didn't know if that would be a good thing or a bad thing. I will need to talk to my NEMORS mentor and discuss this further, but that's the immediate thought I had.
Yes.
Because it will be a...
So each institution, so the NIH institution for the NIH definition for equipment, right? So anything that's sort of a durable piece that you can use for operations it has to be over $5,000. Each institution has their own definition. So at NEMORS is not $5,000, it's $2,500. So, and that will just vary depending on where you're submitting from. But if you're below that level, even though it's hardware, it is considered a supply or a material, right? So, so you can request it on that line. The person who would know for sure, so do you have an idea of who to work with an OSP?
You mean the mentor NEMORS? Yes.
No, for your Office of Sponsored Projects, like the accountants who are at your institution or at the institutions where you're going to be working.
Yes, I identified that person.
Okay, so that person will help you put the budget together, and they may have specific questions about what the particular thing that you need and whether it's an allowable expense. And I'll give you some examples of things that are not allowable expenses. Printer paper, printer ink. Those are things that NIH presumes that the institution provides. And when you get a grant, which this funding will come through CTR, the ACCEL program, that comes from NIH, your institution also gets what are called facilities and administration, or F&A dollars, right? So that's 40, 50, sometimes 60%. So for Sunita, for every dollar you get, NEMORS will get like 42 cents. And those F&A dollars are supposed to provide things like phone and heat and sort of overhead and sort of fundamental supplies for your function. So the OSP people know all of those rules, and what they're going to put into the budget that'll be sent to Jill's group are what are called allowable expenses. And they will help you figure out what line, like what box does the allowable expense go into? And they can help you do that. I actually have this thing. This is just open, and it doesn't have anybody's salary. It's just a mock-up. And if it's not ready for prime time yet. We're still working on it. But if anyone's especially facile with Excel and they want to use this thing, you're welcome to do it. But what this has all the different potential line items of things that you may do on your grant, plus ways to calculate. So ultimately, when this gets distributed, the green boxes you fill in. So that these are just not real people. Mocked up salary, what the benefits rates are, so you can change things. So if you're trying to adjust a budget and you're like, well, I'm the PI, I'm at the salary cap, and I'm going to see what happens if I go 50% time, it just auto recalculates everything. But one of the things it does is on the supply line, you can put things in. So if it's just a supply that you know you're going to need, including like a computer here, you can put that in. If it's like for us, when we do a blood draw, we have to deposit in the biobank. So if I switch how I'm enrolling patients or generating samples, it'll automatically change the yearly allocation of those dollar amounts. That I'm just offering this, but the deal is going to be you have to be good at Excel and you have to help me clean this up and make sure all the calculations are correct. But it's helpful once you figure out the things you want to get, like where you put things and how you balance things, so you get all the supplies, you have all the subjects that you need, and everything's covered as you're working with OSP. And your OSP folks will have their own forms. NEMORS has their own forms that everything goes into, but as sort of a working I'm sometimes doing these things at 2 o'clock in the morning. So there's no OSP person, and I'm trying to figure out how to get a dollar amount below some cutoff that I can go in here and just adjust it. What if I don't have a student, or what if I get a fellow instead of a student, and just mock it up that way? But OSP, like what you can put under fee for service, what you can put, what's allowable under supplies, your OSP person is your best friend.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
For Sunita, I'm going to send you a note with your sponsor program coordinator, because there's one assigned to your department. So she should be able to help you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go see them soon. And let me just clarify with Sunita. If work is going to be done here, your OSP person will have to talk to an OSP person here. I guess work isn't the right. If any money, like if you're going to need to expend money at Nemours for the project, then an OSP person from Nemours will have to be identified too. Do you know who her OSP person is, Jill? Most of the UD folks know the Nemours folks, so they can just make that connection themselves. If not, I can facilitate that.
Okay. Yeah, I think I will need to work with somebody in the OSP in Nemours for their budget as well, and there'll be a UD OSP person as well.
Okay. So who's your collaborator at Nemours?
Erin Krauge?
Oh, Erin. Okay. Yeah, she knows the ropes. Erin knows how to do it.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, folks?
Hey, Dr. Akins, it's Kevin. Can you hear me?
Hey, Kevin. How can we help you?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. The first question is, are 2 PIs allowed in one pilot grant? The second question is, can the mentor be from out-of-state universities?
So the answer to the first question is no. And the pilot grant mechanism, only one PI. You can have co-investigators, but there's only one PI. The answer to the second question is yes.
Yeah.
So the mentor should make the most sense for what you need to do. If your content, like the expert in your field, like in the imaging or the probe or the inflammation, whatever you need for you, if they're not at Nemours, you should have someone at Nemours who is also helping you.
Okay,
right?
sure.
I can tell you, my group, when we're looking through your plans, they're going to insist on that anyway. If you don't have someone local to your institution helping you overcome hurdles and identify problems, that's when we see issues and people not able to do it.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, one last question. Can one PI submit 2 pilot grants? Yes or no? Sorry.
That's been around before. That's a Jill question.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I heard it very clearly.
I kind of lost my ability to mute. Hang on 1 second. Right, Jill, the question was, can one PI submit more than one pilot grant?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. But there is always an effort to distribute across research areas and those that are community engaged versus more clinical, across institutions. So there will be competition.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, folks, we are a little bit over time, and I'm going to stop the recording. Well, actually, one last offer. Does anybody have any other questions? This is not your only chance. You can email questions. The thing to remember is Erin.Riegel, RIEGEL, @nemours.org if you have a professional development question, because she'll triage through a lot of things she can just answer, and she gets to her email fairly quickly. So if you have any questions at all, you can send them to Erin. Even if it's not professional development related, or sort of the writing of the grant or structuring your mentoring team, and Erin can help connect you to the right person. Okay. All right. I'm going to turn recording off.